Hello and welcome to the Management Accounting Applications lecture on Activity-Based Costing, or ABC as it is better known, hosted as always by Dr. Martin Roberts. So ABC, what is it? What you did last week was you did calculation of overhead absorption rate, and that is seen as a traditional method. If you read the textbooks or you look online, it just means it's a very simple and easy, very old way of allocating fixed production overheads to your products. Activity-based costing tries somewhat to replace that, but also tries to look at your fixed costs in a different way. Fixed costs were always seen as fixed, committed, sunk. There's nothing you can do to change them. Activity-based costing sees that as a mistake and thinks that you should challenge your overheads more. There is a challenge under the traditional method to reduce your overheads and therefore also increase your volume to reduce your overhead absorption rate per unit. But it was thought that activity-based costing, a new technique, been around, we say new, it's been around now for quite a long time, but what it tries to do is it tries to look at your overheads differently. It tries to look at what drives your fixed costs. What is it that makes you incur these costs in the first place, and then challenges you to look and see if you can create a saving. Okay, so we have the definition via CIMA, and it's pretty much what we said, is that we are trying to look at what drives our overheads, and then therefore we can create a different cost that might draw attention to your traditional overhead absorption rate full cost pricing method that you've used. It might be that the product ends up cheaper, the product might end up more expensive, and whichever way, that will focus management's attention on behaviours within the factory. Now, where activity-based costing really came to the fore was actually not in manufacturing, although it is used in manufacturing a lot. Where it really became popular was in the banking sector, and the reason why is because the banking sector was one of the first service sectors with intangible products. So what I mean by intangible is you can't really touch a mortgage, as you can see at the bottom. I hope one day you're all able to have a mortgage and to be able to afford your own place. And if you do want a mortgage, in essence it's just a piece of paper with a certain amount of money lent to you to buy a house. But in order for that transaction to take place, there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes. So as you can see, there's a few people there talking to one another, cartoon style, in a bank, and therefore you would need to speak to somebody in person to gain that loan. They would check your credibility and your documents, etc. And then what you've got to also think about is behind the scenes in large headquarters, such as the two at the top, is that people will be working behind the scenes to work out the costs and the applications involved. Now, the hardest bit was trying to work out product profitability. So how do you work out the costs, and how do you work out the costs associated with each intangible product? It's an incredibly difficult process, but if you get it right, you get a great insight into where you could either reduce costs or possibly charge more for your services. So in terms of looking at an ABC framework, is that, like I said, there's two ends of that framework. You have your overheads at one end and you have your products at the other, and in between is you've got two stages of trying to work out your costs and what drives them. So the first thing you do is you've got to think about pooling your costs. You hear the word cost pool. All it means is pooling your cost towards a particular activity. So in this one, what's happened is that ABC is created by looking at your business, interviewing managers, and working out what is it that they spend their time doing. And so in this one, it's been decided that there are three main pools. There is material handling, there is procurement, which means purchasing, and the setup of machines. So for each one of those, all the costs, the utilities, the management time, the management costs obviously, would all be pooled into that particular section. So it could be that a manager works in all three pools. So their salary is then split maybe three ways, maybe in proportion, so that it goes into those pools. So that's very different than what happens from a traditional sense. In a traditional sense, that manager would be allocated to one department or cost centre, and their cost would remain there. There's very little challenge as to what they spend their time doing. So once you've done that and you've put all your costs into cost pools, you then decide what is it that drives those pools. So in this case, there are three things. There is cost per material movement, cost per purchase order, and cost per setup. If we say take the last one, cost per setup, so that's setting up machines, you would know how many machines you have, how many products, and how many times you've got to set the machines up. Once you're able to know that, you're then able to take those costs that you've pooled and allocate them to the various machines. And what you should see is you'll see that maybe one machine takes longer than the other to set up and therefore requires an awful lot more cost and attention on it. And then therefore that gives your management a different view of your fixed costs. Well, maybe we need a new machine. Maybe we need to copy what we do on machine A and we do it on machine B to reduce costs. So there you go, that's a whistle-stop tour of ABC and what it does, but you can go away and read about it. The book is obviously there and you can look online. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through how to do an exam question. So a typical exam question will always have, and you can see it that we've got a lecture example for you to follow as well, which I'll give you the answer for in the next series of these lectures. Is that what happens is the first thing the question will ask you to do is calculate a full cost using traditional overhead absorption methods. And there you go, you use exactly what we did last week. You do budgeted overhead divided by budgeted base, and just be careful with your OAR, whether it's per unit or per hour. If it's per hour, then it's going to fluctuate in relation to how long it takes to make that machine, whereas if it's just a flat unit rate, then you just apply that OAR to each unit. And so there you go, is that what you have is that you have exactly like what we did last week. Direct materials plus direct labour plus your overhead absorption rate will give you a cost per product. But then the exam question, or the questions that you'll face, will then ask you to calculate an activity-based costing based full cost per unit. And so what you're faced with is very, very straightforward. You'll get a question that, alright, I haven't filled all the numbers in, so because I'm only going to use one as an example, is what you'll get is you'll get your cost pools. So here we've got purchasing, machine setups, machine calibration, and because I'm only using one as an example, one cost, which is the purchasing cost, I've put a random 100,000 in there. And then what we've got is we've got the number of the drivers rather, and so we've got number of purchase orders, number of setups, number of tests, and each one of those are in essence helping you to allocate and apportion those costs, that purchase cost of 100 grand across three products. So we've got three products there, A, B, C, and so we know how many purchase orders that happen for each product, and then therefore, as we've got 50 purchase orders, we know roughly a basis by which we can apportion the 100 grand. So we just do it in relation to, like we did last week. There's two ways of doing it. You can either do it cost per order, or you can do it as a percentage. So I'm going to go over the page and show you exactly what I mean, just so you've got it. So there you go. You're just going to apportion, you're going to share your overheads across the products. So because it was 50, 35 and 15, that adds up to 100. So I can easily create, as I would for the second method that we did last week, is that you can create a simple percentage to allocate and apportion your costs across the three products. So there you go, is that very simply 100 grand of 50% would be that you put your cost pool, you would put your cost pool of 100 grand, 50 grand's worth of it would go to A, £35,000 would go to B, and 15,000 would go to C. So then very simply what happens is you do your apportionment exercise over and over again, depending on how many cost pools you've got. So in this case we had 3. I'm keeping it very simple, and what happens is we end up by getting a unit cost for A, B and C. So I've just taken A, so there you go, we've only got the numbers for overhead 1, which is purchasing, and so therefore of the 100 grand, 50 of that goes to A. Then you would do the same for 2 and 3, is that so much cost would be going to A. Once you get that, you add the 3 together, and then what you've got is, if you divide by your production volumes, you will have your activity based cost per unit for A, and then you would compare it to your OAR. So there we go, it's just in essence two acronyms against the other. You will have an activity based cost for A, and you'll have an OAR based cost for A, and you will do a comparison. So all that you do now is that once you've done the numbers, is you'll have a little bit of discussion. You've got to think about which one's better. So in terms of what we're looking at, I've already mentioned this, is that you've got direct materials plus direct labour gives you ABC per unit. So you've got OAR versus ABC. So in essence what you've got to think about is that you've got to think about benefits and disadvantages of ABC, and there they are listed quite easily, is that they provide a more accurate method of costing products and services, allows for better understanding of what's driving those costs, okay, and supports other management techniques. Now I've already mentioned some of these: Kaizen, Balanced Scorecard and TQM. Kaizen was mentioned in one of the seminars, and Kaizen is about getting better. Balanced Scorecard is looking at the view of your company on one piece of paper, and you'll do that at level 6. And TQM is Total Quality Management, and again you'll do that at level 6. Okay. Now the disadvantages, and this is a very key thing about it, is that it takes an awful lot of time. So what normally happens is a company will not switch directly to ABC. It will run in the background. So there'll be somebody dedicated to creating activity-based costs for the products, using the formal and informal set of accounts, but not using ABC as a formal replacement of your accounts. It is just an estimate, and so therefore runs in the background to help management. But to go and identify all the costs, interview all the managers as to what they spend their time doing, is an incredibly time consuming and, to be honest with you, very estimate driven way of doing things. So it can end up that it really isn't telling you the picture that you wanted it to do. And hence that's the third point, is that there is an arbitrary assignment. What we mean by that is that it's an estimate as to which cost goes where, and so you don't really get the full picture. Alright, so that's a whistle-stop tour of ABC. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to have a go at the question, and I will present the answer in the next set of lectures.